Beloved, look closely at every moment of this powerful testimony, and witness how the transforming love of Jesus breaks down false beliefs and brings freedom we all seek in the end. My name is Samir Haddad. I was born in a small neighborhood of Rahal, a crowded town by the sea where everyone knew each other's business. When I was young, my father worked small jobs and my mother baked bread to sell. We were poor, and I learned early that being poor made people hungry for more than food, hungry for pride, for a way to belong, for someone to tell them they mattered. When I was a teenager, I felt very angry. I saw friends disappear, homes destroyed, and nights filled with loud planes and sirens. People around me spoke with sharp voices about revenge and honor. They said the world had taken what belonged to us. At first, I only listened. Then I began to help. I thought I was protecting my family and my street. I thought I was brave. I told myself I was doing what everyone expected of me. I remember the day I lost my leg like it was a slow storm. We were running along a dusty road when I mashed a grenade, my heart beating so loud I could barely hear my own feet. There was shouting and smoke and the air tasted of metal. I fell, and when I opened my eyes the world looked different, quieter but colder. The pain was terrible. I was taken to a small hospital, and for a long time I thought about all the things I had done that could not be undone. After the hospital, life became smaller. I learned to move with crutches. People looked at me with a kind of pity I could not accept. In the nights, when I could not sleep, I would replay faces in my head. Faces of people I had hurt. Faces of friends I had lost. I had joined because I wanted to belong. Now I belonged only to my shame. One afternoon a neighbor knocked on my door. Her name was Miriam. She was a quiet woman who taught children to read in her spare time. She brought a small loaf of bread and sat beside me without asking anything. She told me about a man named Jesus, not with anger or politics, but with a calm voice that felt like cool water. She did not accuse me. She simply said that someone loved me even when I thought I was beyond love. That night, lying on my bed, I prayed not knowing how to pray. It was more like conversation with the dark. I felt a warmth in my chest, like someone lifting a heavy stone from my heart. He revealed to me that I am not only my worst acts. There is a place inside me that can be healed. He let me know that only by facing the truth could I begin to change. I wept until I was exhausted. When I first believed, everything around me did not suddenly become easy. People still shouted in the streets. I still had pain in my stump, and the anger would come back like thunder. But there were small things. Miriam teaching the neighborhood kids, an old man sharing his tea, a child drawing a bright bird on my plaster cast. Those small lights kept me going. I do not tell this to make anyone feel bad or to make myself a hero. I tell it because there was a road I walked that almost swallowed me. And because I want a parent or child reading this to know. People make choices, sometimes terrible ones, and sometimes they carry the weight of those choices for the rest of their lives. But a different choice is always possible. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love to have you join us. We're always excited to welcome thoughtful people like you into this growing community. In the months that followed, I tried to live quietly. I helped Miriam at her small school. At first the children were afraid of me. They saw the crutches, the scars, the hollow eyes of a man who had been in too many fights. But children forgive faster than adults. They began to greet me, bring me small notes, even ask me to tell them stories. I realized then how long it had been since I had spoken words that were not heavy with anger. One boy, Yasin, sat close to me one afternoon and asked, "Uncle Samir, why do you limp?" I told him the truth, but gently, that I had chosen a road of violence, and that road took something from me. His eyes grew wide, and then he said, "But now you choose another road, yes?" That question stayed with me for many nights. Every morning I began to wake up earlier. I would sit by the sea, the air cool, the waves steady. It was there that I first learned how to pray without rage. I did not ask for victory or revenge. I asked only for peace in my heart. Slowly I began to feel it, not all at once, but like the dawn, coming in soft light after a long dark night. But it was not easy. There were whispers in the neighborhood. Some old friends called me a traitor. They said I had become weak, that I had abandoned the struggle. They looked at me as if I had crossed to the enemy. I had to remind myself, peace is not weakness. Forgiveness is not betrayal. Yet still the words cut deep. One evening, I found myself in front of the mirror. I saw a man I barely recognized. Not the fighter, not the angry boy, not the victim with one leg. Just a man with a choice, to live in truth or to keep running from it. That night, I made a vow, never again would I raise my hand in violence. It was the first time in years that I felt free. At first, I kept my story hidden. It was safer that way. People knew pieces, the lost leg, the years of anger, but not the full truth. To speak it aloud felt like opening a wound that had only just begun to heal. But one day, Miriam asked me to come with her to a small house gathering. The room was dim, filled with the smell of tea and the sound of quiet conversation. A few men and women sat in a circle. They had seen suffering too, widows, young men who had lost brothers, a mother holding a picture of her son. Miriam touched my shoulder. "Tell them what you told me." My chest tightened. My mouth was dry. For a long moment, I looked at the floor. Then slowly the words came. I spoke about the boy I had been, hungry for belonging. I spoke about the first time I carried a weapon, how heavy it felt in my hands. I spoke about the road of violence, the loss of my leg, the nights of shame that haunted me. And then I spoke of the strange peace that had come when I turned toward Christ. When I finished, the room was silent. I thought they would reject me, maybe even hate me. But instead, the mother with the picture began to weep softly. One of the men nodded with tears in his eyes. And a young woman whispered, "If God can forgive you, then maybe He can forgive me too." In that moment, I realized something. My wounds could be more than scars. They could be bridges. What had once made me despised could now give others hope. From then on, whenever I was asked, I told my story. Not proudly, not with grand words, but with honesty. Sometimes it hurt. Sometimes the memories came back like fire. But each time, the shame grew lighter. Each time, the hope grew stronger. I learned that speaking the truth aloud was not only for others, it was also healing me. The more I spoke, the more I realized not everyone wanted to hear. Some nights, shadows followed me home. Old companions, men who had once fought beside me, began to knock on my door. Their voices were sharp, full of accusation. "Samir, you have forgotten where you came from. You shame the brothers who died. You sit with our enemies and preach their lies." Their words stung deeper than I expected. These were men I had bled with, men I had once trusted more than family. Now they looked at me as if I had betrayed everything. One night, a stone crashed through my window. On the glass shards was a note: "Keep silent, or you will lose more than your leg." My hands trembled as I picked it up. For a long moment, I felt the old fear return, the fear that kept me bound in anger for so many years. But this time, something was different. Instead of rage, I felt a stillness. I whispered a prayer into the darkness: "Lord, give me strength to stand, even if my legs fail me." The next morning, I walked into Miriam's school on my crutches, the bandage still wrapped around my hand from the glass. The children looked up, wide-eyed. I smiled at them, though my heart was heavy. I realized then, if I gave in to fear, the little ones would learn fear too. If I stood firm, maybe they would learn courage. So I kept speaking. In courtyards, in homes, sometimes even in the market when a stranger asked about my limp. I told them the truth, that hate had nearly destroyed me, and that only forgiveness had given me life again. I knew the cost of this path, but I also knew the weight of silence. And I had carried silence long enough. At first, I thought only a handful of people would care about my story. A mother, a neighbor, a curious child. But word travels quickly in a town like ours, where the streets are narrow and voices echo off the walls. One afternoon, an elder from the nearby village came to see me. His beard was white, his steps slow, but his eyes carried a quiet fire. He said, "I heard you speak of peace. In my village, our young men sharpen their knives. Come and tell them another way." I hesitated. Fear gripped me. What if they rejected me? What if they attacked me? But then I remembered the boy Yasin asking, "Now you choose another road, yes?" How could I teach him courage if I myself hid? So I went. The room was crowded with restless youths, their arms folded, their faces hard. Some sneered when they saw my crutches. One spat on the ground. But I told my story anyway, not with polished words, but with the raw truth of what violence had done to me, to my friends, to my soul. At first, silence. Then murmurs. Finally, one young man stood and said, "You speak like a broken man, but maybe that is why I believe you." In the weeks that followed, more invitations came. Not everyone listened. Some mocked me, others walked out. But a few stayed, and those few began to change. One man left the gang he had joined. Another reconciled with his brother after years of bitterness. A woman told me she no longer dreamed of revenge, but of sending her daughter to school. These were not loud victories. They were quiet, fragile, like seeds hidden in the soil. Yet I began to see that even small ripples could reach wide waters. For the first time in my life, I felt my brokenness was not a curse but a gift, one that could be offered to others. It happened on a night without stars. I was returning from Miriam's school, the streets nearly empty, when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow at first, then quicker. I turned and saw 3 figures step out of the shadows. They were men I once knew. Brothers in arms. Their faces were sharper now, harder, but I recognized the eyes. The leader, Karim, still carried the same scar across his cheek, a reminder of battles we had fought together. "Samir," he said, his voice low, "we warned you. As you follow along with this powerful testimony of transformation, we invite you to engage with the community. Let us know where you're watching from and share your thoughts on how his journey resonates with you. Your reactions and comments help create a meaningful dialogue around life-changing experiences like these." I gripped my crutch tighter, though I knew it would be no weapon. My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. "You were one of us," Karim continued. "We buried friends together. And now you speak against everything we lived for. Against everything they died for." The others muttered, their hands hidden beneath their coats. I felt a chill run through me. This was the moment they could end me. I swallowed hard. "I haven't forgotten them," I said. "Not one face. But I know now that more blood will not honor them. It will only bury us deeper." For a long silence, Karim just stared at me. The street was so quiet I could hear the sea in the distance. Then he stepped closer. His hand brushed the handle of the knife at his belt. My breath caught in my throat. But instead of drawing it, he leaned forward and whispered, "You speak like a fool, but something in me envies your peace." And then, just as suddenly, he turned and walked away. The others followed, glancing back with unreadable eyes. That night, I trembled long after they were gone. I knew they could return, that the danger was real. But I also knew this. The truth had pierced even Karim's hardened heart, if only for a moment. And that moment was worth every risk. I never planned to leave my town. My world had always been narrow, the streets of Rahal, the sea's edge, the small school where Miriam taught. But news has wings, and my story traveled farther than my crutches ever could. One morning, a visitor came from a neighboring city. He was a teacher, thin and soft-spoken, with ink stains on his fingers. He said, "We have young men there, restless and angry. They remind me of how you once were. Will you come speak to them?" I hesitated. My leg ached that day, and the thought of traveling frightened me. But deep inside, I felt the same quiet voice that once called me in the dark. Go. The journey was long. The roads were rough, and each mile tested my strength. Yet when I entered that city hall, filled with rows of youths glaring at me, something inside me steadied. I no longer feared their anger, because I knew it. I had lived it. I told them about the night I fell and lost my leg. I told them about the silence of shame, the crushing weight of regret, the stone through my window, and the choice to forgive instead of hate. I told them about the one who had lifted me when I was sure I was beyond lifting. Not all listened. Some scoffed, some shook their heads. But a few leaned forward, their eyes softer than when I began. Afterward, one boy approached me quietly. He pressed a small knife into my hand and whispered, "I don't need this anymore." I left that city walking lighter than I had arrived. In the weeks that followed, more letters came. Invitations from villages and towns I had never seen. At first, I thought I could not go, that I was too broken, too small. But then I remembered, broken bread feeds many. So I went. Slowly, steadily, my voice carried beyond the walls of Rahal, into places where darkness had long reigned. And in each place, I found the same truth. One story, told honestly, can begin to turn hearts. With each journey, more people gathered to listen. Some came out of curiosity, some out of anger, but many stayed out of hunger, not for food, but for a different kind of nourishment. Words of peace. Words of forgiveness. Words that loosened chains no one could see. In one village, a widow came to me afterward, clutching my hands with trembling fingers. "For 10 years, she said, I have prayed for the man who killed my husband. Tonight I forgave him." Her tears wet my sleeve, and I realized the fire was spreading, not a fire of destruction, but of healing. But with the fire came shadows. The more I spoke, the louder the threats became. Old comrades branded me a traitor across the region. Leaflets with my name on them appeared on market walls, warning people to avoid me. Once, a group tried to block my path on the road, shouting that I was cursed. Another time, I was denied entry to a town where I had been invited, because armed men had vowed to silence me. Fear returned often, whispering in the back of my mind. What if they finish what they started that night in the alley? But then I remembered Karim's whisper, that envy of my peace, and I knew even the hardest hearts could crack. One evening as I sat by the sea, I realized something. This was no longer about me. My story was just the kindling. What truly burned was the hope of forgiveness itself, passed from heart to heart like hidden embers. Even if I were silenced, the fire would not die. Still, I prayed for strength, because I knew the sharper the shadow, the nearer the light. It was during one of my journeys, far from Rahal. I had spoken in a crowded courtyard, my voice echoing against stone walls. Some listened with soft eyes, others with clenched fists. I left quickly, for the air was heavy with tension. That night, as I rested in a small guest room, the door burst open. Masked men stormed in, their rifles raised. My crutches fell to the ground as they dragged me into the street. A crowd had gathered, whispers like a rising storm. One of the men ripped off his mask. It was Karim. His face was hard, colder than before. "Tonight," he said, "you will pay for your betrayal." The barrel of his rifle gleamed under the moonlight. My heart pounded. I thought of Miriam, of Yasin, of the widow who had found peace. Was this the end of my road? But as they pushed me to my one knee, I felt a strange calm wash over me, the same calm that had come the night I first prayed. I lifted my face and said, voice trembling but clear, "You can silence me, Kareem, but you cannot silence forgiveness. Even if I die, the seed is already in the ground." For a long moment, the square was silent. Only the wind moved. Kareem's finger hovered near the trigger. His eyes locked with mine, full of fury, but also something else. Conflict. A shadow of the boy he once was. Finally, with a curse, he lowered the weapon. "Get him out of my sight," he spat. The men shoved me into the dirt and walked away, leaving me bruised but alive. That night, as I lay on the ground staring at the stars, I realized my life was no longer my own. Every breath I still had was a gift, and I would spend it speaking truth, no matter the cost. Years have passed since that night. I still walk with crutches, though the wood is worn smooth from my hands. The scars remain, reminders of the road I once chose. But when I see children laughing in the schoolyard,